Coming up in This Week in Computer Hardware, 4 awesome air coolers, Samsung's new 960 SSDs, Forza 3 beats on GPUs, and so many headphones. All that and more coming up next on TWiCH.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust. This is TWiCH.
Bandwidth for TWiCH is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 382, recorded September 22nd, 2016. Air coolers are pretty awesome. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Braintree. Mobile app development can be complex, but integrating your payments no longer has to be. With Braintree, your business can accept nearly every type of payment from any device with just one integration. Learn more at braintreepayments.com/twitch. And by Tracker. Tracker makes losing things a thing of the past. Pair Tracker to your smartphone, attach it to any item, and find its precise location with the tap of a button. Visit thetracker.com right now and enter promo code TWiCH for 30% off your entire order. And by Zipcar, the largest car-sharing network in the world. To earn $25 in driving credit, visit joinzipcar.com/twit. Welcome to TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, TWiCH's weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, most informative, most engaging, and yes, ladies and gentlemen, even the most accurate discussion of hardware, your questions, what's new and exciting, mobile devices, and I think there's going to be a fair amount of audio discussion on this show, because joining me, ladies and gentlemen, is PC Per's Sebastian Peak, who, like myself, has some audio issues.
Yeah, it's a disease, a very expensive disease.
Well, it's only expensive if you take it in that direction. I got to ask, over your shoulder, what's the speaker up there?
That is a Wharfedale Jade 3.
Ooh, Wharfedales are nice. That's
those are really, really accurate sounding. A three-way speaker is not common in a bookshelf.
No, I gotta say, I'm also assuming that's not its usual position when you're listening to it, because I'm thinking stereo imaging.
No, and I will say the amount of concessions you have to make when you have a 1-year-old who's learning how to walk and climb. I shouldn't even have speakers in the living room at all.
That's always frightening when you somebody's like, that's a really hefty wall mount for your HD TV. This was when my oldest son was about 2 years old, and I'm like, yes, because I found my son doing pull-ups on the HD TV in the middle of the living room. So everything got massively secured. And then all of the Blu-rays and DVDs got hidden, because one day I found him crawling up on the chair and he was whipping Blu-rays off the shelf over his shoulder so he could hear them hit the wall of books behind him and then bounce to the floor. It turns out Blu-ray, that super hard surface on a Blu-ray is actually really good at resisting scratches. I'll just leave it at that. We're going to talk about, you did a roundup of some big honking CPU air coolers. We'll talk about that in a second. Ryan is in Texas doing things I cannot talk about involving laptops and possibly a large body of water. That's as far as I'll go with that. Alan is in Korea right now, where Samsung has unveiled the, quote, crazy fast 960 Pro and 960 EVO M.2 NVMe SSDs. He's at the Global SSD Summit in Korea. 960 Pro, 512, 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte capabilities, sequential 3.5 gigabyte per second reads, 2.1 gigabyte per second writes, 4K random IOPS, 440,000 read, 360,000 writes. Dynamic thermal guard, which is a new version of their over temperature protection, which you may not think is necessary until you've actually held your hand on one of these during a large transfer. 5-year warranty, and the endurance peaks at 1.2 petabytes for the 2 terabyte model. And 512 gigabyte model is going to start at $330.64 a gigabyte, which is pretty typical for an NVMe price. And then the 960 EVO, 250 gigabyte, 500 gigabyte, and 1 terabyte capacities. Pretty much similar read specs, 3.2 gigabytes per second, 1.9 gigabytes per second writes. That write speed is for the Turbo Write SLC cache. 4K random IOPS, 380,000 read, 360,000 writes. Again, the dynamic thermal guard, 3-year warranty. somewhat lower endurance ratings for the Evo versus the Pro. And the 250 gigabyte version will start at $129.99 or 52 cents a gigabyte. And Alan's first note on that is he would, quote, really like to see Samsung push the 960 Evo capabilities upwards of 4 terabytes. And he feels that the pricing they're a little high, which makes sense given that we've seen some of the new products from Intel and other places pushing the sub 50 cents a gigabyte for NVMe capable drives at this point.
Yeah, we talked last night on our podcast about the pricing, and really these are a little bit less expensive than the 950 Pro when it launched as far as cost per gig. Mm-hmm. So they are coming down. These are clearly the premium product,
right?
And there's obviously stuff out there that's a lot more affordable when you get up to that 960 gigabyte mark where you can flirt with 20 cents or less per gigabyte. Mm-hmm. But the numbers on these, I was going over these last night, it almost looks like a mistake. You're looking at 3.5 gigabytes per second reads and over 2 gigabytes per second writes. Mm-hmm. And then those Evo drives, like the 1 terabyte Evo now, 42 gigabytes of that flash is assigned to an SLC cache. That's huge. So they're
feeding the beast at that point. No, I was going to say like the caches get larger and presumably the cache management will show up significantly better than what we saw in the Intel 600 a couple weeks ago. It's been interesting because I've gotten a lot of questions lately on Tech Thing where people are like, what is NVMe again? And one, it's a leading edge, it's the latest, basically. It's the new SATA, right? It's the new hard drive controller interface. But a lot of people don't realize that when you have SSDs on SATA, they pretty much all cap out at 500 gigabytes per second, or 500 gigabits per second, right? Because SATA's got a 600 gigabit per second ceiling. And NVMe not only pushes those the SSD performance over, like, I want to say you can get up to like 4 gigabits per second gigabytes per second over 4 lanes on Gen 3 PCI Express. But the other big thing is it takes advantage of the ability of disk I/O requests, because it's so radically different between an SSD and a rotating hard drive, where you're looking at like 65,536, simultaneous messaging or requests for 4 kilobyte transfers, where SATA has 2.
Yeah. There was a time when SSDs started to get more affordable, and it was kind of embarrassing, I thought, for me to be on a spinning drive for my primary disk. And now I'm almost ashamed of my 240 gig SSD because it's just a SATA drive. And it's fairly inexpensive to go out and buy one of these NVMe drives. So as motherboards come out, and all of them are going to have M.2, or you buy an adapter card.
Right.
These are starting to get cheap enough. Like $129 was a really, really attractive price on a quarter terabyte drive just a year or two ago.
Right. I don't know. It's at this point, it's the boost for me. The difference in performance on NVMe on a laptop versus a SATA SSD on a desktop is not as noticeable for most things, at least compared to the jump. The jump from going to a hard drive to a SATA or to an SSD drive, even over SATA, is just so ridiculously huge. What I'm waiting for is like those 4 terabyte 850 EVOs to drop down, to something affordable. The 1 terabytes are still at $300, 2 terabytes at $600. I would love to not have like a 200 gigabyte main drive, or 240 gigabyte main drive, or 250 gigabyte main drive, since apparently I'm going to list every ladder of 10 until I get to 250 gigabytes. But man, I would kill for like a cheap 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte NVMe drive. What I really want is a cheap 2 terabyte SSD drive. Actually, scroll up a little bit. There's some crazy, as part of the heat control in this, what you're actually looking at is a breakdown of the label on the 960. And they actually put a layer of, there's basically glue, copper, glue, and then the plastic that makes up the label above that. So they're attempting to distribute the heat from the chips across as many or as much surface area as they can. That's pretty crazy stuff.
If it weren't for notebook installations, you would think they would just use a heat spreader. But I know that, height is an issue when you're dealing with those tight install spaces.
Be curious to see if anybody starts doing aftermarket heat spreaders, or if anybody starts tearing these labels off and just putting a big old aluminum heat sink across these. It's good.
And a tiny 10 millimeter fan. Active cooling on your SSD.
I don't even know where to go with that. It'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see what people start doing. At this point, I wonder if anybody's actually done some really good examination on the overall thermals inside the case between a SATA drive and a rotating hard media, or like a traditional rotating drive, in terms of the actual numbers of BTUs coming off of both. That would be pretty crazy. To see whether or not, because with the SATA drives, it's concentrated in a much smaller space, but is it really that much more or less than a traditional hard drive? Of course, I'm thinking of sort of overall thermals in the case as I stare over at a case over here, rather than thinking about the thermals on the individual device. Oh, yeah. Man. Speaking of which, air coolers are not dead by any stretch of the imagination. And they're pretty freaking awesome these days, I think.
And you get yourself a big tower cooler if you have the room for it in your case, and they can't beat the best liquid cooling setups and the more premium all-in-one liquid coolers, but they come really close. And they do it with, very, very low noise if you're buying one of the larger ones. The group that I had for this little roundup that I did, I started with 3, 2 that I'd recently reviewed, and then the Noctua NHD14. Which is a very well-known, multi-award-winning cooler that they have now discontinued. Right. They've replaced it with the D15, but it's widely available. And it's come down to where you can get it for about $69 on Amazon now. So this, in addition to being the only dual tower, like 2-tower, 2-fan cooler I tested, is also the oldest design. But I decided to throw in the Hyper 212 EVO, Cooler Master's insanely popular air cooler that retails for $29, just to see what it could do. And so the price range went from that $30 mark up to about $80. And when I actually tested these, even though they varied greatly in overall size, weight, the fans are different between them, the top 3 actually were clustered pretty close together with their thermal results. Right. And very close in noise, where in a space that averages between 33 and 34 decibels, I couldn't hear them. And under load, you could just make out kind of the wind noise, but the fans on these larger coolers are effectively silent when they're inside a case. And the EVO, even though it produced quite a bit more noise, is not loud by any stretch, and certainly isn't any louder than even a quiet GPU, with most of which I've tested somewhere around 40 decibels under full load. So around 40, 42 decibels, even pushing a 4 gigahertz overclock on all 6 cores of an i7 6800K, and keeping that under control. Right. The big coolers, of course, did a far better job, but I felt like at the end, and kind of in looking at the comments in our reader interaction so far, the EVO kind of stole the show, because even though it didn't quite perform as well, it's doing it with such an unbeatable price performance ratio that it sort of reaffirmed it again to a lot of enthusiasts as, hey, I could save money on my cooler and buy myself one of those SSDs.
Or 8 gigabytes of RAM, almost. Yeah. Not quite. Most of another stick of 8 gigabytes of RAM. Well, when people are, when you're looking at this, right, the spread on these, that's for looks like we're looking at the stock one right now. It goes from 30.8 to 35.8 degrees Celsius at stress, i.e., everything maxed out on the cores. And there's no real performance difference you're going to see at that point.
Oh no, yeah, there's absolutely no throttling. You're nowhere near hitting the limit. So it's almost it's not arbitrary, but 5 degrees when you're well within thermal limits is not a problem.
Got it. How about when you sort of, did you find that any of them, I mean, at this point, I'm looking at you boosted the Core i7-6800K running at 4 gigahertz. Again, the spread is from 54.3 degrees Celsius on the Noctua up to 61.1 degrees Celsius on the Cooler Master Hyper 212 EVO. I mean, again, 6 degrees Celsius, is that going to give you, I mean, are you going to get to 4100 hertz for overclocking, in that extra 6 gigahertz, or is it just something that's just, it's practically within the noise, it seems like? Noise
I think so.
Bad word to bring up.
Yeah, I looked at like kind of, it's within that 1 degree, like plus minus accuracy. Like when you're looking at margin of error and they're that close together, I was kind of stunned because I was looking at delta temps. All of these are, subtracting the room temperature, but I wasn't seeing anything higher than like 81, 82 degrees C, even factoring in the room temp, which was in the mid 70s for a lot of these tests.
Right.
So it was pretty remarkable that I feared that I was going to hit 90 or above with some of the coolers when I pushed all 6 of those cores, because I had to increase the core voltage a little bit, but the wattage that was being drawn was enough to stress an all-in-one liquid cooler.
Sure.
And even of the liquid coolers that I've tested recently, these air coolers were only a handful of degrees behind, and still did more than enough.
It seems like back in the day there was a huge delta between the performance of liquid coolers and air coolers, and it seems it's just, unless you're completely out of control or you want to start liquid cooling additional devices inside your case, for example, multiple GPUs, it seems like there's not a huge advantage to liquid cooling in most situations.
Yeah, it does add a little bit of complexity, not much, and it makes it adds that extra step for installing it in your case, and it almost feels like, for the difference in dollars, like for me to have a cooler that outperforms the NHD14 from Noctua, which was kind of our little roundup winner, even though it only won by the skin of its teeth.
Right.
That's a $69 to $79 cooler. I needed a $120 air cooler just to beat it by any significant margin. So if you're looking at a liquid cooler in the $100 to $120 range, or I could just buy this tower cooler for $50, $60, $70 and have no discernible noise output inside of a case. That's the big deal for me, because an air cooler like the Scythe Ninja 4 that was in this group, that is the quietest cooler I have ever not heard. It's so quiet. I almost have to put my ear up against the side of the fan to hear the turbulence and realize, oh, this is running.
It's on.
And yeah, it has a 3-position switch, and you can set it to low, and you cannot hear it at all. And even then, that cooler offers great performance and is quieter than the pump on any liquid cooler I've ever tested.
That's pretty amazing.
Fan noise is often a little bit higher with liquid coolers, just because you have that radiator.
Right. Does that create that much turbulence and therefore that much more noise sucking the air through the veins of the radiator? I've
only heard it in the performance modes. Like if I take a Corsair cooler and put it in performance, then yes, because the fans will spin up to like 24 or 2500 RPM, and now you can really hear it. But in quiet mode, not at all. But it's just one of those things. Like I think I would have to push the CPU a lot harder than I did to really see these start to, like, to see the gap widen. Got it. Yeah, so for most people, if you're spending $400 on an enthusiast CPU, and even then you overclock it, 600 megahertz, you're still just fine with almost any of these coolers.
This is a good thing. I mean, it's funny, when you look at dB measure, and it's logarithmic, it's not a direct scale. So, plus 10B, is twice the perceived volume or loudness. You know, so you might look at that and be like, 40 dB, but the reality is like 40 dB is like a bird call, the inside of a library. 30 dB, like one of my favorite comparisons is a quiet rural area. So drive out to the sticks, shut your car down. As long as you're not standing next to a cow, or somebody's tractor, it's impressively quiet. So it's you know it seems like it's this huge delta, and in some ways it is in terms of measuring it, but in terms of what you're hearing, 40 dB is even 1/8 as loud as 70 dB, which is a typical listening level for a television or maybe a modern vacuum cleaner, and it's just not that loud.
Yeah, we have come a long way since the days when overclocking meant having one of those Typhoon fans, or spinning something over 5,000 RPM where it's screaming like a hair dryer or a vacuum cleaner. With the EVO, even at that 42 decibels, it just sounds like there's a fan running in your computer. It's not even that noticeable. There's no whine to it.
Not whining is a good thing.
Yes.
We should take a moment to thank our sponsor, Braintree. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Braintree. By next year, maybe even next week, there could be a whole new way to pay. Might be the next Bitcoin, the next Apple Pay, or maybe even both. Fortunately, Braintree's full-stack payment platform is easily adaptable to whatever the future holds, so you can adapt easily too. Accept everything from pounds to PayPal to that next big innovation from any device with just one integration. And when that new payment method comes along, all you'll have to do is update a few lines of code. No late nights, no complicated recoding, no stress about staying ahead of the curve. Braintree Payments is here to help. Simple, secure payments code you can integrate quickly. The Braintree code supports Android, iOS, and JavaScript clients. They have SDKs in 7 languages: .NET, Node.js, Java, Perl, PHP, Python, Ruby. They are on it, people. And the folks I know who code say that this is elegant code with clear documentation. Clear documentation makes it easier for you, and that's what Braintree is all about, people. Braintree gives you an easy way to accept multiple payment types with one integration. Integrating it into your app is as easy as inserting a few lines of code. Learn more at braintreepayments.com/twitch. That's braintreepayments.com/TWiCH. And we want to thank Braintree for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. AirPods are out. Well, AirPods, people have been listening to the AirPods.
Have you been listening to the AirPods?
I talked to a friend of mine and then decided not to bother until they ship. They're available late October, right? And a very generous friend of mine who is not particularly he is not an audio geek by any stretch of the imagination. Basically, flat out said, "Yeah, they sound like EarPods," which is really, really disappointing when you realize that they could have done. They could have made something that sounds really good. It's the EarPods stink. Apple could be doing so much more. They could have been doing so much more even before they brought Beats on board. We won't get into the relative merits of that, but these are really about Siri, and about being wireless and about eliminating the headphone jack, but unfortunately seem to be pretty mediocre as far as the music playback is concerned. Just as mediocre as the EarPods, which stinks because they're $159 and there are some fantastic in-ear devices available for that kind of money.
Yes, but do they have capacitive touch on the side?
Yeah, I admire all the engineering that went into the AirPods. I mean, from a gee whiz standpoint, they're pretty gee whiz. Everything I hear is that the connectivity is fantastic. Capacitive touch, I get it. No buttons, everything's easier. But I'd really like my music to sound fantastic. Yeah,
that's the thing. Was fun. Yeah, you kind of want the tech to get out of the way when you're listening to music and just. Mm-hmm. I don't care what the headphones look like. If they sound good and I can afford them, that's what I want to wear. It's interesting. I've been reading a lot of stuff by Sean Olive lately, who is a research fellow at Harman, the audio company down in Southern California. And one of the things he said recently was about 30% of the people they surveyed, or about 30% of Americans, I guess was extrapolated from the survey, typically listen through the speakers in their laptop. Or some similar kind of device. So, for example, most people don't hear like the bottom third of human hearing. Like, there's generally not much under 200-300 dB. So they don't hear the lower bass. They're not used to particularly good highs or stereo separation. So, I think Apple went with we're going to do all the cool stuff, and maybe they'll let the beats do the talking where the music is.
we were shooting. We cut open a Lightning headphone adapter on Tech Thing, just in time. Like we were recording it, and a friend of mine texted me. He's like, "Dude, did you see?" And a Vietnamese website did the same thing, where they basically tore open a Lightning adapter, and it looks to be a complete DAC inside of there. Which is, there's no way I'm going to get this to focus on this webcam. But I was amazed, actually, at how burly the construction was, because it's a plastic exterior. A couple of layers of welded steel, thin welded steel, some rubber, some plastic rubbery kind of stuff, and then the actual chips themselves. Sounds pretty much identical to the audio out of my iPhone 6. As long as you have iOS 10, you can use this. The wire cutter, we were talking to Lauren Dragan from the Wirecutter, and it looks like there are some early issues people have uncovered with, with the, it basically, parts of the Lightning adapter stop working if you stop using your phone. Quote, if you have no music playing or you aren't on a phone call and you lock the iPhone 7 and leave the adapter connected to the iPhone's Lightning connector port, which is typical, right? You pull your earbuds out or you pull your headphones off and you set it down. After about 5 minutes, she says, the remote and mic on connected headphones will cease to function until you unplug and replug the headphones or the adapter. And that will fix the problem. But basically, you can still listen, but you can't actually talk or use the remote until you physically disconnect and reconnect the Lightning adapter. So if you're listening and you get a phone call, if it's been more than 5 minutes, you could actually, you're basically going to have to like yank the Lightning adapter and plug it back in to get it to start working. Doesn't seem to happen with the EarPods with Lightning connector, and Business Insider says there will be a software update to address the issue. So
basically the scenario where you would actually need it to work. You've been listening to music for a while. Your phone rings and hello? Yeah. There's something wrong with my phone. I wonder if unplugging that adapter and plugging it back in actually declines the call. I wonder. I haven't tested this yet.
I haven't really thought about it, but it's an interesting question. I don't know. It's one more sign that it's nice to know that Apple's working on it. They've already released it, the first update to the Apple Watch Series 2, and I think developers have the 10.1 update. I don't think the 10.1 update is out yet, but I'm not going to dig into my phone to find out. You and I both got a chance to listen to Audeze's SINE on-ear planar magnetic headphones. Was this your first experience with planar magnetics?
No, I'd heard, I think, the LCD 3s before, and was blown away by them. But it was at a dealer who had a really high-end headphone amp and a really like high-resolution digital audio player. So when I heard the signs on the show floor at CES, they were just plugging them into an iPhone that they had at their booth, and they sounded absolutely fantastic. I think it was as noisy as it was on the show floor. I didn't think I was going to be able to really discern anything, and they actually blocked enough external noise that it was really impressive. Even just flipping through the songs they had, I don't think any of which were over like 16-bit 44.1, just CD quality tracks or lower. A lot of Apple Music tracks still sounded fantastic. A lot of bass, very warm but detailed. And then they were nice enough to agree to loan a pair to us for a review. So I had them here for a couple of weeks, listening to them through their Cypher cable, which, it was only rumored at that point that the iPhone 7 was going to be dropping the headphone jack. But it made so much sense that a product like this, and then I'm sure many others to follow, will be very attractive to somebody who's into higher end sound quality, but needs something with that Lightning connector. And the Cypher cable has the DAC and headphone amp right in line with the volume control. And it was really nice. You've heard these, right?
I've heard these. In fact, I have a pair of, I have one last video to shoot with these, then they have to go back, but it's significantly larger than the device they use inside of Apple's headphone adapter. In I think no small part because they wanted to actually put the remote buttons on there. And for folks that haven't heard Planar Magnetics, the idea is that instead of using a dynamic speaker, basically a cone, a magnet that drives it forth. We got a picture there from Interfidelity where they gutted what I'm guessing is another. I don't know if it's a Audeze thing, but I don't know if we can get that picture up there. But it's essentially they do a super thin mylar material. Scroll down just a little bit, right, and what you have. Right up to the top will be right there, perfect. Because what you essentially have is 2 layers of magnets, and then the part in the middle is this super thin plastic material of some type, and they run. Basically, there's like copper wiring. That's the wrong word for it across the top, and by running the current from the amplifier through that, it pulls back and forth, and you get this massive movement of air towards your ears. And they're particularly known for really, really good sound staging, very, very crisp and detailed highs, and it's been interesting watching the last year as the planar magnetics have gotten so good. That's actually caused a lot of traditional headphone designers to kind of up their game and figure out ways to deliver the kind of sound staging and quality in the high end of the audio. The other thing that planar magnetics do is they're usually pretty flat down into the sub bass.
Yes.
So they sound particularly fantastic if you're doing EDM or orchestral music, or if you've got somebody that really hammers on the low end of a bass. Not inexpensive, although they're getting less expensive. The SINEs are $500, which is inexpensive for a set of Audeze headphones, but out of reach for most people. Fostex makes planar magnetics. It started about $150. Not as good at the low end as some of the other ones, and kind of the choice right now for a lot of people is Hi-Fi Man's 400S, which
those are 300, I think,
right around there.
Or those 400, yeah.
I will check because the prices on things, they keep changing.
And then, of course, was it Monoprice that just announced a $199 pair?
Yeah, I'm really curious.
They're trying to get into that space.
They have a sealed pair for like $199, and then an open pair, which looks like a cross between an Audeze and a Hi-Fi Man product. Literally looks like they mocked the sort of over-ear part from Audeze with the headband part from Hi-Fi Man and smushed them together into another product. Those are part of it. They did a huge release of new home theater products, more high-end home theater products, a whole new lineup for them a few weeks ago. There it is, the Monolith series, the best value in high-end audio. And I'm kind of curious if those amps are made by, who's making those amps for Monoprice. Because I'd like to find out that they're by ATI, which is down in LA. There they are, the Monolith M1060 planar headphone and the Monolith M560 planar headphones, which, $300 for the 1060s. That look oh so much like the Audeze Hi-Fi Man Smersh, and then the M560 planar headphones are selling at $200, and no pre-orders as of this point. They look like they're both shipping. Ooh, well, we don't know when the 1060s are shipping, but the 560s are going to be shipping at the end of October. So hopefully we'll get a chance to listen to those. Fatality by Monster FXM 100 over-ear gaming headphones review. What did you think, man? Having listened to a lot more high-end headphones lately, are you delighted or frustrated by Monster's Fatality headset?
I was actually pleasantly surprised because even though I'm not expecting from a gaming headset that's marketed to console gamers and sold in that department at Best Buy stores, I wasn't expecting like audiophile sound, but they sound, first of all, they have extremely heavy bass.
Right.
So if you like that really aggressive, prominent bass and lower mid-range sound, these have it in spades, and they're incredibly easy to drive. I could not find any hard numbers on actually any of their specifications. I don't see frequency response, sensitivity, driver size, but they are very, very easy to drive and can get quite loud without any noticeable distortion. So that was a plus. And then they're feather light. I have a pair right here.
Mm-hmm.
And these are 6 ounces, including the boom mic.
Wow.
My phone in a case is just under 6 ounces. So these are super light, and the pads are really soft. So the clamping force is kind of medium. It's not real. It doesn't squeeze the sides of your head very much. So you can wear them and barely feel like you're wearing them. Not quite to the extent of, headphones like the Audio-Technica, the AD-H700X, I believe is what I have. Mm-hmm. They sort of rest against the sides of your head, but there's no real clamping force. This is probably the second most comfortable pair of headphones that I've worn recently to those, because they're so light. And I think when I was listening to music, it was almost too much. I had to back off on the bass a little bit with the EQ settings. But playing games and hearing explosions and things with that much impact was a lot of fun. So it's for movies and games on your laptop or on your console. They're great. They have one of the shortest cords I've ever seen, and it's not removable, so you're kind of stuck with it. It was 3 feet 9 inches.
Ooh.
So if you're gaming on a laptop or you're using, the controller, the headphone port on your controller on a PS4 and Xbox One, no problem. And they have an inline volume control and an inline mute switch, which is handy, but very, very short cable was a little concerning, but I would be curious to see if the version they will be selling on their website, which includes a Y adapter for PC use, if that has any longer of a cord. Because if you're sitting at your computer desk and you have your tower down on the floor, there's no way you're plugging this into the back if you have a dedicated sound card.
You can get an extension cable. It's pretty reasonably priced still.
Yeah. So, and that's true. It had a few dollars, but at this price, these are $69 headphones at full MSRP. And I was kind of comparing them to some of the gaming headsets I've looked at recently. Like the closest in price was Corsair's Void Hybrid, which is $79 and is an analog stereo headset just like this, except it also includes a Dolby headphone adapter in the box. So you get those simulated 7.1 channel effects, which are fairly convincing depending on the material. And I don't know though, for $69, especially if you're a bass head, if you love deep, rich bass, my wife loves these type of headphones, then I think that
explosions.
Yeah, this is the person who, when I met her, had 2 JL Audio subs in the back of her minivan. So all she cared about was bass. They were wired with an extension cord, but it didn't matter.
Because they were loud and they were deep.
Because they were loud, yes. They rattled everything inside the car. So she was happy.
Oh, my goodness. If you're worried about losing your subwoofers, people, you're going to love our next sponsor. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Tracker. Smart cars, smartphones, smart homes technology has made everything just a little bit smarter, but losing your possessions, like your subwoofer, can make smart people feel less than smart. Tracker makes losing things a thing of the past. Maybe somebody in your house has a habit of leaving the keys somewhere different every time. Oh, look at that. Keys, people. The Tracker can help that, especially if you have small children in the house who tend to hide things. I'm not thinking about anybody in my house, of course. Tracker is a coincide device that locates misplaced keys, wallets, backpacks, bicycles, computers, even pets in seconds. You just pair a Tracker to your smartphone, attach it to any item, and you can find its precise location with a tap of a button. It is that easy. You can track up to 10 devices at once, and Tracker is enabled by Bluetooth Low Energy, so the battery lasts up to 1 year. You can customize two-way separation alerts, so you're notified before you forget your item or before somebody walks away with it. And if you lose your phone, you can press the Tracker button, and your phone will ring even if it's on silent. How cool is that? You can personalize your Tracker with a laser-engraved message or a custom printed image. I can think of one I would print on a Tracker to give to a certain spouse creature I live with, but I won't get into that right now. It's cool stuff. And with over 1.5 million devices, Tracker has the largest crowd GPS network in the world, so your lost item shows up on a map even if it's miles away. It's really slick. The Tracker app records your lost item's last known location on a map, and when another Tracker user comes within a 100-foot range of your item, you get a GPS update of your item's location. Tracker Atlas works with your Tracker Bravo or third-party Bluetooth tracker to pinpoint your items on a customizable floor plan of your home. Just ask Tracker Atlas where your item is, and you will instantly get an answer with no need to search. Go to thetracker.com and never lose your possessions again. Plus, just for our audience, if you enter in the promo code TWiCH, that's TWiCH, you'll get 30% off your entire order. That's a fat discount, people, and look at all those trackers out there in the world. Go to thetracker.com, promo code TWiCH, that's THETRACKR.com, promo code TWICH for 30% off your entire tracker order. And we want to thank them for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. Forza Horizon 3 official launch September 27th. The Ultimate Edition pre-orders on the 23rd. The demo on the Xbox One is out. This is a pretty game. PC World did a great kind of early review of it and was kind of blown away that, one, it looks gorgeous. That didn't really, strike him as too unusual. But the reviewer's home machine, Hayden Dingman wrote it up, quote, "My home machine is running on an NVIDIA GTX 980 Ti with the brand new game-ready drivers. My jaw dropped when I booted up Forza Horizon 3, and it recommended I run everything on medium settings." He could get a 60 frames per second on high, but this is a game that is finally going to beat the snot out of your GPU. It's gorgeous. The video looks gorgeous. If you haven't seen it, it is pretty amazing. I also might be biased because I like racing around in the desert in trucks, and there's a lot of truck and buggy options out there for this one. As you would expect, AMD has released the Crimson Edition 16.9.2 driver, which oddly enough aligns with the Ultimate Edition SKU of Forza Horizon 3, as Scott noted on PC Per.
Yeah, it's funny how that works.
Funny how that works. If you're running NVIDIA, don't worry. Don't worry. The GeForce 372.90 drivers are out. And it's always amazing. Have you ever had the experience where you couldn't really play a game and then a driver update came out and it suddenly functioned the way you expected it to?
Not personally, but if you're like buying things day one, I would imagine that would happen to be very frustrating.
More than a little bit frustrating.
But look, here's a game finally that encourages you to buy the new hardware. How bad would you feel if you bought a 1080 and then it posed no challenge? Everything was running at 200 frames per second.
Right.
So here's something to actually, justify the expense of that shiny new GPU.
Oh my goodness, that reminds me. I was digging through Amazon before we fired up the show. I am delighted to say that GPUs, the NVIDIA GPUs, are in stock and actually selling for the prices they should be. GTX 1060 6GB versions for $279 or $269 available to ship tomorrow or the day after. GTX 1070s are selling for $400 to $430, which is, yes, underneath the suggested retail price. And even GTX 1080 seem to be in volume. Are you doing sort of 1080p gaming, or have you upgraded to a higher resolution monitor yet, Sebastian?
I'm on a 2560 by 1440 monitor, nice. So I would definitely need to upgrade to play a game like this new Forza Horizon game. I'm on a R9 290X still, so more than enough for most games, even at high settings. But you really, some of the newer stuff, I do have to back off a little bit.
Yeah, for my machine at home, I think because it's such a tiny case, I think the most GPU I can fit in it right now is a GTX 1060, one of the 3GB versions, which is going to do okay for 1080p. I've got a 2560 by 1440 monitor at home, and it'll be interesting to see how that does with some of the newer stuff. I am worried, but I also really like that case which cost more than a GTX 1060. So I'm not sure I'm going to upgrade that anytime soon. Always gets frustrating when you can't fit stuff in the enclosure you have. Have you seen the shots of Razer's new turret?
No, I have not.
Yeah. So they started out with the lapdog, which is the big, massive, couch-based, giant, cushioned, full-size mechanical keyboard and mouse platform, and they just came out with a much smaller device, the turret. So if you scroll down a little bit more, you'll notice that they have a big old tray that kind of slides out. That's the lapdog and the turret next to each other, and the turret looks tiny. This is legionhardware.com, did a full review of the Razer turrets, and we're actually impressed. If you haven't done living room gaming and you have a really nice HD TV or a projector, gaming with a projector is fantastic until you try to figure out where you're going to put your keyboard and your mouse. If you're using a console, which I can't bring into my home for fear of divorce, feel free to mock me at this point. But it's tiny. Compared to the laptop, and the fact that the keyboard kind of folds under there, that big old mousing platform fold under makes it pretty slick. Downside, it's wireless, which is a plus. The keys aren't backlit, which can be a little frustrating if you're gaming in a dark environment. The real downside for me on this one is the price, which is not bad given that people are paying $160 for gaming keyboards, but you're looking at $159 for the turret, the keyboard, and the mouse package together. So,
compared to the cost of a mechanical keyboard, like you said, those are around $100 for the most part. It's not too bad. I would be a little worried about the mousing surface being rather small, but if they didn't have a problem with the kind of the Y-axis movement with that mouse, it should be enough. I mean, those gaming mice have such crazy sensitive sensors on them that you barely need to move your hand at all anyway.
Yeah. No, it can be, if you're not used to a gaming mouse with it turned up, 3600 DPI can be kind of completely out of control until you adjust your mousing. I like the stand, the charging stand for it's pretty slick. It also looks like cool. It won't be. One of the things I found really frustrating about the lapdog, I like the idea of the big padded cushion with the keyboard and the mouse, but they set it up so that when the lapdog is centered, the keyboard is way over here, and I still find that immensely frustrating when gaming. But I also
plus, does it have a cup holder? Does it have a pocket to put snacks into?
I don't think it does.
Those are the big questions. I mean, this is living room gaming after all. Turn the lights down low. Who knows where the chips are falling?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, Corsair's lapdog, 4K living room gaming with zero compromise, except you're right. I'm looking at the lapdog on the Corsair webpage, and it verifies my memory. There is no snack tray and there is no cup holder, but maybe modding it to have a cup holder is the next step.
It could be done. It's almost as if the manufacturer is saying, please, please do not eat and drink using our product. We don't want to have to clean your keyboard out under warranty.
Well, let's see. The lapdog is $119. Figure you can go for an inexpensive, let's see the K70 Lux. Yeah, those are all $199.99. So that's not counting the mouse. You've racked up, wow, over $320. And you probably don't want beverages on that. Point taken. Oh, my goodness. We have one more sponsor in this episode. This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Zipcar, the world's largest car-sharing network operating in over 500 cities, towns, colleges, and more than 50 airports around the world. Zipcar provides a cost-effective alternative to car ownership. Zipsters pay only for the time they actually use a vehicle and have no responsibility for additional costs. Drive cars by the hour or by the day with gas and insurance included, which makes it so much more reasonable. With Zipcar, you'll have the freedom to choose when and where you want to drive. Zipcar's self-service vehicles are available on demand and conveniently located reserved parking spots in your neighborhood. Reserve your Zipcar in minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by calling or visiting the website, and you simply book the vehicle of your choosing and unlock your selected vehicle with your Zipcard. It is super easy, people. Over 50 makes and models of cars that range from environmentally friendly hybrids, EVs and PHEVs, to luxury vehicles, SUVs, pickup trucks, and cargo vans. So when you're getting back from that big box store, you actually don't have to strap it to the top of your neighbor's car. It's nice to be able to rent a cargo van. You'll have the option to choose the make, model, type, and even color of the vehicle you want based on the needs of each trip and the available zip cars in your area. Reserving, accessing, and using a zip car is as easy as getting cash from an ATM. And car sharing is good for the environment. Zipsters reduce their personal CO2 emissions by between 1,100 and 1,600 pounds per year. Go you. For wheels when you want them and $25 in driving credit, go to joinzipcar.com/twit. That's joinzipcar.com/TWIT. And we thank Zipcar for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. Oh, man. Are you running Linux on anything at home, or are you primarily running Windows?
You know, for a while, I was running the latest version of Ubuntu, which I think is 16.10. But for the most part, I run Windows 8.1 Pro.
Right.
And my wife is on a Mac.
So it's a multi-operating set, a blended household, as it were.
It is. And I get to play tech support for all of it, of course.
Of course. Well, it keeps you sharp, man. There was a pretty big kerfuffle yesterday. A couple of friends of mine who are Kali Linux loving hackers kind of went nuts because a Reddit thread came out that Lenovo signature editions of like the Yoga 900S and Yoga 710, Microsoft cut Lenovo a check and they won't run Linux. And people were going nuts online. And the reality is that the Intel soft rate on those boxes really won't work with Linux because Intel doesn't have, basically hasn't produced the drivers on it. And then Lenovo, as Jeremy points out, made it more difficult to change your SATA from RAID to HCI in the BIOS in Windows, and, quote, impossible in a live boot of Linux. Which is really frustrating. So if you haven't, basically, these machines are set up for power management reasons. Essentially, it has a RAID to run Linux. Because there's no Linux driver support for that, you got to change it to AHCS, and it's an incredible pain. And then you need to talk to Lenovo to get some kind of functioning drivers for ACH, which means you have to contact Lenovo, and they only work in Windows. So the short answer is you really can't install Linux on signature editions of some Yoga machines. So that can be really, really frustrating. That said, the Reddit thread that said Microsoft and Lenovo are conspiring, or that Microsoft had paid Lenovo to prevent this from happening, seems to be profoundly untrue in terms of the sort of payment marketing operation, but not in terms of the frustration of using it. And it's been interesting because, we've gotten to play with some of Dell. Dell's doing a pretty fantastic job of supporting Linux on the XPS 13s. We played around with some other devices. It's been interesting to note how much easier it is to run Linux on a laptop that is pre-configured with Linux versus running Linux on a laptop that is, almost entirely run by Windows with no thought of Linux support built into it. I mean, that might sound obvious now that I've said it out loud, but if you are looking to rock a Linux distro, you're probably going to be spending some quality time getting the performance or just any of the basic features, drivers running on it. I'm just saying, man, I had some very angry friends this week.
Hey, you try installing even an older version of Windows on a lot of these new laptops. I can't even imagine the issues you'd run into. It kind of works, but I can't get the full screen resolution, and the Wi-Fi doesn't work, and all the problems you can run into trying to install Linux on a new laptop that doesn't have a lot of mature driver support yet from the community.
Emotionally traumatic.
Yeah.
Or at least, emotionally traumatic and time-consuming, which may be worse.
Hey, I was emotionally distressed just by installing Windows 8 on those Dell XPS laptops I reviewed earlier this year, because I needed it for a couple of benchmarks, and it wasn't fun.
No, I'm so sorry. This too shall pass. Actually, it just keeps getting worse every couple of years. I don't know what I'm saying. October 4th, big Google announcement. You can sign up to get an email from Google the minute it happens, but you can probably safely guess at this point that we're talking about new phones from Google, which, according to all the rumors, will not be Nexus, but will be Pixel branded.
This makes me very sad.
Because you believed in Nexus, or you hate the idea of a Pixel phone?
it's actually neither of those. I didn't ever believe that Nexus was going to be more than a developer platform, just because no one I ever talked to really appreciated it as like a phone brand.
Sure.
It seems like the smartphone landscape is divided between Apple and Samsung, and then there's the other players. And Nexus was a very niche product, but I loved it. I was on a Nexus starting with the 4 and waited each year for the new iteration and new features and wondering who the hardware would even be made by. But I insist on running stock Android, so whether it's called Nexus or Pixel, that would still be my Android phone of choice.
Right.
It's just, I don't know. I was attached to the name. I'm a Blade Runner fan, so there's the Nexus project. Maybe it was actually, no, it couldn't have been copyright related. They solved that a long time ago. I don't really know. But Pixel, obviously, their premium Chromebooks carry the Pixel branding. They probably want to unify the brand. But
we'll find out.
I just want to see what the hardware looks like and how it performs before I make up my mind. Is it worth a move off of a 5X or a 6P at this point?
It's a really good question. The one of the more obscure announcements that came out this week, Jeremy wrote it up on PC Per. It's popped up in a bunch of other places. The Inquirer has a pretty deep article. ARM's new Cortex R52, which is replacing the R5. ARM's basically like it's 14 times faster than the model it replaces, but kind of the big deal is that it's doing hypervisor instructions and, quote, unspecified safety features. And it's kind of the first time I think we've seen somebody who wasn't, say, a security professional openly acknowledging that the Internet of Things, whether you're talking about hospital equipment or cars or stupid little light bulbs that get turned on and off by a remote control or an app on your phone, actually have some profound security issues. So, in this case, ARM is actually going out of their way to make sure that the default settings that are used with the processor are, quote, far more secure, unquote, than current systems on a chip. What happens after that, at least, if they run into a situation where somebody specs this part and dumps it into a device and doesn't actually do any, testing or security pen testing on the device, at least the basics will be set up in place to kind of secure things. It's kind of crazy, right? Because they've been working on this for 5 years. In the background, working on determinism, working on real-time responsiveness, rather than going for we need a big, massive, single-core CPU performance. We want the real-world kind of performance to be much better. One of the things up Anantech wrote that you're looking more like 35% in common CPU benchmarks. But that they are working really, really hard to improve interrupt entry and context switching performance. And that context switching performance is where they're looking at the 14-fold increase and interrupt entry performance doubling. So, I'm curious to see what this shows up in. I don't think we're going to see any consumer products on this for a long time, but it's an interesting idea to look at them try to build processors that are designed for hey, this is going to be in the advanced drivers assistance systems, in next generation vehicles and stuff. I don't know. I mean, are you feeling comfortable with the whole idea of cars driving themselves? Or are you still kind of wrapping your mind around that?
I'm still getting used to it. It does scare me a little bit to think about the security implications of a lot of things just openly connected to the internet with no real security at all. So any advances in that side of it are welcome. So if they're building it right into the hardware, things that we've seen from, desktop processors for a long time, once baking in some sort of security is definitely a good thing for a device that probably is operating at a very basic level and relying a lot on hardware functionality.
Sure.
I can't run antivirus software on everything.
You can't even access everything to run antivirus or anything else on it at this point. Oh, man. In another since we've done a lot of conversations about automobile and autonomous vehicles in the past few weeks. McLaren, the auto manufacturer, the racing kind of organization, the high-end automotive manufacturer, has officially claimed that Apple is not buying them. Quote, there's no takeover, no strategic investment. McLaren spokesperson told Business Insider, it is completely untrue. So the, if you were excited to see what, Apple could do with the makers of one of the best supercars on the planet.
It's probably good news for anybody hoping to actually be able to afford whatever they end up coming out with.
Well, I mean, McLaren is, I think like a 650S, because like the idea is like, Ferrari is for driving enthusiasts, McLarens are for people who are stupid excited about automotive technology. I think we're looking at like $400,000 for a 650S.
Is that all? Okay.
I could be wrong about that. The more than enough to buy a house in most of the United States still. It is, I'm sure they're fun to drive, and I'm quite certain I will never get the chance. I'm still kind of curious to see what an Apple car design would be like.
Minimalist.
Yeah. Hopefully better than the AirPods, since I'm feeling kind of irritated by the audio quality on the AirPods. Hopefully the speakers in the Apple car will be better than the EarPods. How's that for cranky?
They'll have beautiful grills over them. Rest assured. One-piece molded aluminum grills.
And you'll only be able to upgrade if you buy special new speakers from Apple. I am cranky today. You got anything you're reviewing you can tease for what's coming up on PC Per?
Actually, yes, I place it here strategically. Over my shoulder, I have this Acer Predator ultra short throw gaming projector.
Ooh, these are cool.
This thing is really cool. It's not for sale anywhere yet that I can find, and the MSRP when they announced it back in March is staggering. It is a laser projector.
Oh wow, that would explain the staggering part.
Yeah, and it's 24 by 9, which really it's a 1920 by 720 projector. So it'll do ultra wide from your PC, and it looks absolutely phenomenal to me. And it's amazing that I have never used a ultra short throw projector before. This thing, 20 inches away from the wall, is putting up a 100-inch screen.
And that's what they mean by short throws, is you don't have to have it 11 feet away from the wall. You can have it a relatively minor distance.
Right. They do ratios. Crazy. Like a short throw is somewhere around 0.5 to 1 versus a regular projector, and the ultra short throws are like 0.25 to 1. So you can get them really, really close to the screen. You could put this on the ceiling right above your screen, about a foot back, and project 80 inches.
That's crazy.
You could install this in any room.
Have you had much time to game with it yet, or are you just getting it set up?
Just getting it set up. I have a screen coming tomorrow. I was just projecting it on the living room wall yesterday, and it was a ton of fun. I was like, I'll move it back a little bit more. Look, now I'm at 100 inches, and it's barely away from the wall.
That's pretty amazing. Oh, dude.
But $5,000.
Well, there are less expensive projectors, 720 projectors. You're playing with bleeding edge. So the fact that it's using lasers instead of a lamp is pretty crazy.
And it's nice not to have to worry about focus, because these just are wherever it is, that's where it's in focus. Right.
That's pretty crazy. Yeah, I mean, when you realize that there's so many amazing projectors for under $1,000 now, you just can't fit them 12 inches from the wall. I mean, man, like Optoma, and these are all 1080p projectors. Optoma's got like 5 projectors between $500 and $700. Epsa's Home Cinema 2040 is at $739. BenQ's HC 2050 is at $800. This is awesome. They just
trust me. I've been reading up on these since last night. Ever since I had this up, knowing I have to send this back, like I kind of want a projector now, and they're not that expensive for 1080p anymore.
Projectors will ruin you for HD TVs, even ones that aren't as technically sophisticated as this one. The trick is like figuring out where to mount them. Like I actually put an outlet in my ceiling to power my projector.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, no, it's if you have the ability to put an outlet in your ceiling, it makes it basically run the HDMI. Instead of doing wireless HDMI, which still tends to drop out if people walk between the source and the projector. But it's amazing. Also, gaming with a 100-inch screen is incredible. Wow, dude, I'm so stoked. I cannot wait to read that review on PC Per, ladies and gentlemen. I'm getting hands-on comparing Amplify, the standard definition, not just the HD version, but the inexpensive sub $300 version against Eero to get some mesh networking on, which has been kind of exciting. Because it's amazing what you can do for not much money, and comparing those to sort of like a standard TP-Link C7 to get an idea of how they compare to a very, very inexpensive home router in a smaller home, and then here at the warehouse, which is like 5,000 square feet. Hint, the smaller router does not do as well in a 5,000 square foot warehouse, especially if it's in one corner. Might be revealing the obvious there, but keep an eye on This Week in Computer Hardware for an update on that. Oh, and I did Dell's new U3417W, which is their new widescreen curved monitor, which is much more curved than the previous monitor, which it's a 1900R instead of a 3800R, which is the definition of the radius of the circle it's defined by. So it's twice as curvy as the previous.
Okay, yes. So the smaller the radius, you're dealing with a much more aggressive curve.
Essentially goes from the equivalent of the outside edge of a 3.8 meter circle to the outside edge of a 1.9 meter circle. It ends up making sort of straight lines in certain sections if you use a lot of stuff seam curved, although I think that may be more of an optical effect than the actual reality. I've been a little afraid to try to hold a straight edge up to the curved monitor for fear of damaging it, but I'll figure that out.
But you feel like you're right there inside the game, don't you?
I like it a lot. I 90% of the time I'm actually using it for, I'm sitting here looking at 1, 2, 3 sort of, side-by-side columns of windows. Most of the time I'm using it for work. And it's a little more difficult than a 4K monitor because, Windows 10 has that awesome, Windows key arrow to line up 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2 columns. And now I want Windows to have 1, 2, 3 columns, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screens on the page instead of just 4, which is probably not something we're going to do, but I'll ask. But I actually really like it. Makes it super easy. It makes it super easy to use multiple windows simultaneously, and it's not nearly as intense on your GPU as a 4K monitor. Although it's 3440 by 1400, so it's a much bigger load than a 1080p monitor by any stretch of the imagination. So
for sure, yeah.
Oh my goodness, Sebastian, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on This Week in Computer Hardware this week.
Anytime.
Thanks, man. Ladies and gentlemen, you can find more Sebastian's work at PCPer.com. If you haven't, go there and start reading it now, especially that roundup on air coolers. If you're looking to spend a lot of money on a new cooler, don't read Sebastian's article on PCPer first. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Patrick Norton.
And I'm Sebastian Peak.
We'll talk to you next week on Twitch.